And we are recording. Take it away.
Good morning, everybody. So it's October the 8th, and I'm glad to be on the call with you all. We normally, of course, start off with the slaughterhouse of failure is not in our destiny. We will persist until we succeed. Ogmandino. I just want to reflect on a few things that happened this week. I just want to call it unintended consequences and learning from our missteps. So over the last year, I guess I've grown a little rash with the COVID idea, believing in us pretty well covered as far as my immunity is concerned. I had 2 vaccinations. My antioxidant score is 89,000, generally healthy diet. So I kind of let my guard down, I think. So on Saturday, when I came back from Utah, I felt sick. I was really, really sick. My head exploded with pain. Every joint in my body hurt as if I'd fallen out of a plane. Tuesday, I was tested positive. My fault, my decision. On Wednesday, my wife had the same symptoms. She tested positive. She'd been to work at the hospital on Monday morning with physicians and nurses of the neonatal departments. And I thought about my own responsibility. Kari got COVID thanks to me. Because of me, they all have to go and get tested. All the people that she came into contact with, hopefully no one got contaminated. If God forbid some test positive, I'll be distraught to think that because of me, I've robbed some patients of their health care. I was aware that, in many ways, we affect people with what we do. Kari's now in quarantine for 15 days. This is time we're taking to go on vacation, which is lost. We were going to Aruba. This morning she said, thanks for a memorable anniversary present. This was our anniversary. So I just want to say that I was looking at the ramifications and the consequences of what we do and what happens. And I'm sorry, I actually don't feel well still, obviously, but this is, it's an important thing to think about what we do, because we can affect other people. So on today's call, which is the normal one that we're talking about the persuasion is a natural thing for us. This is in our leadership call. So, this is something that we're used to doing, persuading people, right from when we were kids. Mom, please, I need to have this, or Mom, I need to have that. And we start trying to persuade our moms. Dan?
Absolutely. I think, the ability to persuade people, this whole topic is kind of interesting to me, because I think a lot of times when people hear about persuasion or the word persuasion, they think has a negative connotation to it, or there's something diabolical about it where you're trying to persuade people. But persuasion is neither good nor bad. It's how you go about persuading people, and how you choose to influence them. determines whether it can be good or bad, right? So, that negative connotation comes from a mindset about how we think about persuasion, and persuasion is basically the same thing as influence, right? We're using what we know to try and change people's mindset about what we're talking to them about. So it's something meant to get you to do something or believe something, and the act of influencing someone to do something or to change their mind, right? So we have all of those tools available to us. It's just how do we use them? So what are the weapons of influence? And I'm not going to use the word persuasion, because I think influence is a much less threatening word for persuasion. So some of those weapons are storytelling, which we use on a daily basis. We talk about the company, we talk about how Pharmanex came to be, how Pharmanex came to be part of New Skin, where we got the technology from for the scanner and all of those things. And then there's hard data as well. That's another weapon of influence. We have the studies, we have, the Harvard study, the Yale study, all these different studies, and then studies that Pharmanex have done, and clinicals that Pharmanex has done on the products, right? And then our last weapon of influence is the close, right? And trying to get those people that we're talking to understand how this affects not only them, but affects other people that they're trying to introduce to the business. So, as Lawrence mentioned, persuasion or influence happens every day in our lives. And we've all used persuasion or influence, right? For the time we were born, like he mentioned, trying to influence our parents or persuade our parents, trying to persuade somebody to go on a date with us, to marry us, to give us a job, all of these different facets of persuasion and influence, we all use them. It's just how you go about using them, right? And so, when I was looking into this topic a little bit more in detail, Aristotle had a trinity of persuasion, 3 things. You guys have probably heard of these: logos, pathos, and ethos, right? So logos is appealing to people's logic when you're trying to influence them. Talking to them, in our case, talking to them about the studies and the science of the scanner and things along those lines. And then you have pathos, which is appealing to their emotions, right? And Lawrence does this really well. He talks about, taking out the samurai sword and sticking it in and moving it around and really getting them to feel that pain of why they're even listening to us, right? And then ethos is appealing to the ethics, the morals, the character. And that comes back to a personal thing about how we're able to influence people based on our ethics, morals, character, or our standing and whatever our particular past has been. For me, my ethos is, I know a lot about medical device sales, and I know a lot about that space. So I'm really good at talking to medical device reps and being persuasive and influencing them. A physician, for instance, has their medical degree and all the studies that they've done to get where they are, and that's how they're able to influence others. And so we have to look at these different things, these weapons of influence, the storytelling, the hard data, how we're going to close somebody, and then Aristotle's trinity of persuasion when we're thinking about how we're going to persuade others.
Yeah, I think also the idea about persuading goes a lot more than that. For example, we're looking at when politicians speak and they manage to persuade thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, it's usually from something like FOMO, fear of missing out something, or fear of loss. So fear of loss or fear of missing out, it's a kind of a fear. So when we're persuading somebody, we're not only using a carrot, we're also using a stick. We're using a way to be able to think, this is a good alternative to something that may not be such a good alternative. So I think it's important that we also understand that this talent of communication is something that that actually can it works, because it is, as Dan said, the logic, the emotion, and the ego character part of it. And that's really what it's all about. And if we can understand that, and we show passion in what we've got and what we're doing, I think that's it. That's basically what persuasion is about, is about being passionate about what we have and appealing to the emotion of the person, either through the logic or through the personality of the person, but with facts that we have. So we've just got it all. We've got all the facts, we've got the science, we've got the technology, we've got everything to be able to persuade people to do things, not to do things, to see things that we see. That's basically what it's about. It's about showing people what we see. We see certain things, and it's an art to be able to show people, let them see what we see.
You know, it's hugely important is being able to portray what we have to somebody, but along with that comes your audience, and you need to know your audience and tailor your conversation or your points of influence for each individual person. And so, you know, in sales, the hardest thing to do is cold calling. Talking to somebody that you've never talked to before, you know nothing about them, you don't know where to start. And so that's where communication and listening becomes very, very important. In those types of situations where you don't know someone well or you don't know them at all, listening and communication can make or break that entire conversation and where it goes from there, right? You need to know how to speak to them, and having an introduction to somebody is completely different because they already are being somewhat influenced by the fact that somebody is introducing you to them, right? And that gives you some allegiance to that person who's doing the introduction. So that automatically gives you some bandwidth to be able to have a conversation with somebody about what you're really trying to influence them, or how you're trying to influence them. But it becomes, it's very, very difficult when you don't know anything about people. You don't know somebody that has a connection to that person. And so you really want to focus on communication and listening more than you're talking, so that you can tailor that conversation, that art of influence, to that individual person. And so, there's a lot of books out there on influence, the art of influence. Chris Widener, Robert Cialdini has a book, the Psychology of Persuasion, it's called. Some very good books about, and not only do they talk about it from a moral, ethical standpoint, and that it's not something that's necessarily bad, but they teach you the skills to be able to formulate your conversation to be as influential as you can possibly be, because there are steps to being influential.
That's one of the reasons why when we talk about scripts and written word tracking, in my opinion, that is absolutely not of any consequence, because it's not authentic, and it's just reading, or it's just memorizing some script or something. That's not the way to get to somebody, to make him or her see what you see. And I think it's important that we're able to absolutely be authentic in everything we do. And by being authentic, we already halfway there, because even if we don't know the other person so well, obviously in a cold call we don't know them, but if they see that we're genuine and that we're passionate, then we're halfway there. And I think that's the first part of the hurdle, is to let your ego out of the window and be authentic and genuine.
I mentioned Aristotle's Trinity of Persuasion, and there's those three steps: logos, pathos, and ethos. Ethos is actually the most important, and that goes to Lawrence's point. Building that credibility, building that, creating that belief that we have, and projecting that to other people becomes very important in that process. asking questions and communicating, listening. Last week we talked about the curiosity of a child, having that curiosity. And, when we're talking to somebody who doesn't know what we have. So I was on a call yesterday with a gentleman, with Mike Cook actually, and Chuck Ray, and a potential rep. And I got into the conversation about, why he should be interested in this. And he didn't even know what we had. And I wasn't aware of that. And so I had to kind of switch my conversation midway to, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought you had more information on what exactly we're talking about, the scanner and this and that. So I had to alter my conversation to have that curiosity of a child, learn a little bit about him, learn what his background was, what he's done in the past, why he is interested in looking at this. And he was a medical device rep. And I just wanted to lead him down that path, that he was unhappy with where he's at and where that space is going, and that he's looking for something different. Right. And so you do that through having that curiosity of a child and being able to ask as many questions as possible. But you need to do it in a calculated way to lead them down the path that you want them to go down, rather than them leading you down a path that you don't want to go down. Right. And so I ask questions, but I follow it up with a belief of my own. And 90% of the time they agree. Right. Because I know that space, and I know how to talk to medical device reps about what's happening in that profession right now. And so, I can lead them down a path that's going to have a positive influence on them. And, it was funny because Mike and Chuck, we were on a Zoom call, but the person that we were talking to couldn't get on a Zoom call. He couldn't download the app. He hadn't downloaded it beforehand. So we three-way called him. So Mike, Chuck, and myself, we're able to see each other, but the person that we're talking to was unable to talk to us. And it was just funny watching Michael and Chuck's facial expressions and things as we were having that conversation, because they were just like smiling and giving thumbs up. And, it was just leading that person down a path that it was a positive experience for them.
Yeah, I think, again, your passion is transmit your knowledge, first of all, and your experience comes into that huge as well. And I say it's always like this, the fear of loss, fear of missing out. And in your case, Dan, when you talk to medical device reps and they've been successful all the time, and you can then show them that, we're heading towards an abyss, and you're showing them that they're going to lose out on something there, but we have a solution. So that's where experience comes in your field, and where you can actually show them that the possibilities that we have that are unlimited.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's really interesting about talking to medical device reps right now is that all of them know where this is going. They all know that things are changing, and it's getting them to accept that fact, because not all of them are ready to accept that things are changing and they're not changing for the better. The only people that I come across that still have positive things to say about that space are kids who've gone to medical device college, or they just graduated college and they're just starting out in the business, because they're still rosy-eyed and seeing the world through rose-colored glasses and all of those things, and they haven't been exposed to the realities of what's going on in that space right now. So being able to persuade people is a normal part of our everyday life, whether we want to accept it or not. And we just need to learn how to use the tools of this business that we have available to us to be more persuasive and influence people, so that they want to join us in the business.
On what you're saying, Dan, another lesson that I've just learned from this stuff with COVID, and that is, we're talking about your team, and we're talking about bonding, and we're talking about who we were trying to work with and so on. And I just want to give a little shout out to my cook and something that happened. You know, I asked somebody if they had any reishi max. That was on Monday, and they said, yeah. I said, could I borrow some? And they said, oh, no, I'll give you some. I said, oh, thank you. And that was it. And I had a conversation with Michael a short time later, and he said, you need to double up on quercetin and zinc. And I said, yeah, okay, you're right. Well, the next morning at 5:30 in the morning, there was a delivery of quercetin and zinc, and that was from my cook. This is where leadership comes in, and this is where you learn to know who's who in the zoo. Who are your team? Who are the people you are working with? Who are your friends? Who are the people that you can rely on? Who are the people that are impacting you and you are impacting them? So, Mike, thank you so much for that. And I think it made a difference, because today I'm a hell of a lot better than I was yesterday. Yesterday, I couldn't even talk. So thank you.
Martin has a great comment in the notes here that the purpose of great art, music, movies is to make us feel emotion. If we can do the same in our sales approach, we have a vastly greater probability of success. We can do this through questions, empathy, and passion. And that, you know, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about having that passion. And when you have that passion, I think that rubs off on other people, right? And they start thinking about things a little bit differently. So just through virtue of our passion, we're able to influence and persuade people.
There's no doubt, because passion is an emotion which rubs off. Think about the whatever emotion you look at. If you laugh, I mean, we once did a call and we showed a little video of a guy walking into a train wagon, and he was looking at his iPad and he started laughing, and he laughed and laughed and laughed, and then suddenly another 2 or 3 people laughed, and by the end of it, the whole wagon of in the train we're all laughing. That's what emotion is about. It's about the contagion of your compassion. The contagion of your emotion is what passion can be all about. And if you're really passionate about what you do because you know what you know, leaving the ego aside, because that's a dangerous little weapon that we've got, but leave the ego aside, and just to be able to come talk with your heart, that's a big deal.
Right, and the way you do that in this business is you get on these calls, you learn what we have, you look at the things that are in our Dropbox folder, all the collaterals that we have available to us, the clinicals on the products, get out to the healthcare forum, and once you do all of those things, that passion is going to build. If you leave your ego behind and you take a good hard look at what we have, right? And I think I've talked about this multiple times in the past, but the hardest thing when talking to medical device reps about this business is they're passionate about sales. They're passionate about sales and they're passionate about making money, but they're not necessarily passionate about what we're passionate about with the biophotonic scanner, preventive medicine, and the nutraceuticals. And so what happens a lot of times is that you talk to a medical device rep about this and they automatically want to say, oh, well, I want to go out and talk to a couple of people about this and see what they think. Okay, well, that's great, but you don't know what we have. I don't know how you're going to have a conversation with them without knowing exactly what we have. And when you don't have that passion, it's going to be much harder to influence somebody about what we have. And so I have that conversation with them and I say, look, if there's somebody that you really want to get their opinion on this, get them on the phone with somebody on our team. Don't just go to say, hey, we've got this device that measures something and it measures what you're lacking in, which is what most people say before they know everything that we have. And it can make money for your practice. Is that something that you'd be interested in? That's not a lot to go on. That's not how you're going to influence somebody. That's not how you're going to persuade someone to really take a good hard look at what we have and use it in their practice. You have to have those three things: logos, ethos, and pathos, to be able to tell that story and provide that hard data to whoever we're talking about. I'm sorry. So Lawrence, it's 9:57. Do you have anything else to add? Do you want to open it up for questions, comments?
Sure. Go ahead.
If anybody has anything that they'd like to share, we'd be happy to.
Anything, please. Anybody want to add anything?
Well, I find it interesting, Dan, here towards the end, you're really talking about, taking all this, these influences and really bringing them to a higher level by bringing in the influence of another person. And I guess that just gets into the whole psychology of credibility, is provided through, a third party. And it's interesting how we may know everything, that has been taught at the forums and all of that. But if we really try to convince someone of all that all by ourselves, what you're saying is we're going to have a much lower probability of having the proper influence because we didn't use that key element of that third party validation.
Yeah, some of the best sales calls that I've ever done and most successful sales calls were done with another person. So you all know Jerry Savage. Most of you have met Jerry Savage. He and I worked together for a number of years, and he and I would do sales calls together, and we'd have very, very good success because I think, when you're trying to influence someone, it's hard to tell somebody what you have, watch their emotions, watch their body language, remember everything that you want to tell them, tailor that conversation to them based on their feedback, and still be able to be effective. And so that's where a second person comes in, right? They can help you with that influence. They can add that validation. They can keep you on track. They can help change the course of the conversation because they're seeing something different than you're seeing or hearing, more importantly, and being able to tailor it, with two people. Two heads are always better than one.
I just want to add something that, this is not only about making money. In order to be passionate, in order to really be effective, we're kind of married to not only the technology, but what the technology and the ramifications are and what they can do. And I think that's important when we look at what this technology does, helps people make educated lifestyle choices. So it's not just about the money. It's about being able to convey, just how great this thing is. I mean, there's $100 million in that and all the science and all the rest of it. And that's where the passion comes. It comes on what we have rather than what they can make out of it. And we're trying to get people to understand that they can be a part of this too.
I'd like to comment, Lawrence. First of all, it's good to see that you are doing better. Very, very appreciative of that. But when we're talking about influencing and persuading someone, I tend to take the approach that I want to persuade them to look at what we have and really understand it, not to buy into the program necessarily, but to learn what we have. And then it's a decision. I don't want to lead anyone somewhere they don't want to go, but I want to inform them about what they don't know. It's always, what we say here all the time, you don't know what you don't know. And if I've done my job and informed them correctly, then they will make the decision to do this if it's something that they want to do. If they don't want to do it, I really don't want to work with them if they're fully informed about what we have, because that's, as you say, like pushing a rope.
Well, it's important to use that influence, like you're saying, to show them what we have, not necessarily to sell them on joining the business. And John Whitaker used to always say that he he sold or he talked to people about the forum and not necessarily what we have, because all the influence, I think the influence of being in Utah is much greater than the influence that you or I can provide. We can provide influence on a certain level, but taking them from that mindset of knowing what we have to seeing that a lot of other people know what we have and see what we have and have implemented it and integrated it makes a huge difference. And for them to get, eyes on corporate and see what's going on out there, see the building, see the scientists, see the labs, makes a huge difference, I think.
It does. And, just to comment on that too, the thing I believe one of the biggest values that I got out of this last trip out there, I've been there multiple times, as many on this call have, it's the fellowship of being there with everyone and being a part of a conversation between an optometrist and an ophthalmologist, and them pulling out their phone and showing membranes of the eye and what they experienced in a patient over a few months after being on our product. It's one thing to read these reports, look at the studies on PubMed and things like that, but when you're talking with a practitioner that's using this and they show you that, it really hits home, right? And it allows us to speak even more freely than we did before about what we're doing, and that fellowship is fantastic.
Martin, you're chomping at the bit to say something, I can tell.
No, not really, but
no? Okay.
I did have a thought, and it was about three-way calling. I remember Nathan Ricks, who some of us know, a few of us know. He's probably the most successful man ever in multi-level marketing. He's racked up earnings of somewhat in excess of $100 million. So nobody can argue with that track record. But anyway, he said, it's interesting. I was talking for a long time with somebody and explaining to them everything we had and so on. And I just wasn't getting anywhere. The message was not penetrating. And he said, then I got them on a three-way call with one of my colleagues. And he said, suddenly this person opened up and said, oh my goodness, wow, this is absolutely incredible. He said, I told him exactly the same thing about 3 or 4 times in the past, but he received this as if it was sort of original biblical truth from this other guy, and then absolutely joined us in the business.
I've had that happen multiple times, and some of it I think comes down to credibility. From my experiences, came down to credibility. I'd be in there as a sales rep, and I'd bring a manager along with me, and he has a higher position, and he tells the exact same thing, Martin. They tell him the exact same thing that I told them, but for some reason, coming from somebody higher up that's seen in more of a position of power or whatever it may be, they tend to listen to what they were saying instead of just hearing what I was saying.
Right.
I think there's a real psychology to it. I think there's truth that, if you bring in someone who you identify at a higher level, I would go as far as to say the way this psychology works, you could truly bring someone in who knows half what you know, but when you introduce them, you raise them up through all of their own personal accomplishments, and then you let them go, and when they talk, the other person's listening with a whole different perspective. I think you could pull it off just because of the psychology of man or women, that you could pull that off with not almost anyone, but certainly it doesn't have to be someone way above you.
Right.
That's partly to do with effective edification. And if somebody edifies you really well, by the time they've finished, you're kind of thinking to yourself, wow, I really want to meet this person.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other comments, questions, concerns? All right. Well, we're all glad that LCC is on the mend, and hopefully Kari isn't too affected by this. Thank you for your perspective this morning, Lawrence. Really appreciate it. And everybody who has added to the conversation. We always look forward to getting different perspectives. And so I just want to remind everybody about the Monday and the Wednesday calls. Monday with Scott Bennett at 9:30. Wednesday with Dr. Manzi Shah and Kent Nelson. Be sure to plug into those calls. The next forum is going to be January 20th. So start formulating a plan to get as many folks out there as possible, and we'll see everybody next week.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Have a great weekend, and Lawrence, stay well, my friend. Get better.
You better, Lawrence. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Blessings. Bye-bye.
Better, Lawrence.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Take care,
you.
Lawrence.
Thank you.
Take care, Lawrence.